by Tobias Bihler. He's a policy officer in a division on structural change through coal phase-out in the German Federal Ministry for Economics and Climate Action. And he's going to talk about the structural change through coal phase-out in Germany. Welcome to the stage.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction. So a correction already in the first second. I'm not a doctor, so you will notice while my presentation said I'm not a doctor. The presentation can start now. I can do that. I press green. Here. Okay, as introduced, thank you for the introduction. I'm with the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, also responsible for energy. So makes sense that we are responsible for the coal phase out in Germany, and I'm responsible for making use of the structural chance we have phasing out of coal. What I want to present to you today and later discuss is the structural change we undergo in Germany through the coal phase out, and I'm more responsible for the economic aspects, including economic diversification. I will in a minute specify that point that's more in Germany more an general regional economic development where we also need to diversify, but we're not as dependent on coal as in probably other countries. So the energy aspects I'm not touching so much. Having said this, I will start with the energy slide first. So just to take everyone on board, this is where we stand in Germany right now with using coal, hard coal and lignite coal. So this is a chart on the right side from yesterday. So you see we still use coal a lot. Exactly. So bringing you on board also regional-wise. This is Germany here on the top right corner, where we see all the basically power plants using coal. The big gray ones are the ones using lignite coal. The white ones using hard coal. We phase out all of them. And we focus now mainly on the lignite aspects. So on the left side, you see the regions in Germany who are now touched by the coal phase out of mainly lignite coal, and who are now also subject to our efforts to develop and to do some regional economic development. As I said earlier, the aspect of diversifying, Mr. Matthias will probably touch on this as well, is not such a big aspect in Germany anymore as it used to be like 30, 45, 50 years ago, since like the direct employment in those regions being the most dependent on coal, and most is relatively, since we are not such economic-wise dependent on coal anymore, the direct employment is like a bit less than 20,000 employees, and also the share of production in the gross domestic product is below or 1.5%, something like this. So, having said this, why do we still have such huge efforts in developing those regions? Those regions are per se a structural weak anyhow, so they need some support per se. And what comes into play as well is that especially those regions in the east, the topic of structural change is of explicit political sensitivity, keeping in mind the structural change those areas went through during the German and especially after the German reunification. So what we need to do is taking everyone on board in those regions, explaining the structural change we go through, and doing our best to master the structural change. So what we had in mind is in 2018 to set up a commission called Coal Commission with all the actors involved in those regions, in policy and academia, in labor unions, trade unions, industry as well, and had a lengthy negotiation process coming up in the end with basically 2 acts on the top bottom. On the left, there's actually the report of the Coal Commission available in English. If you want to, I recommend you to read it. So I will show you what the result of this negotiation process was about, being actually a twofold strategy written in 2 acts, which are now actually governing our period from 2020 until 2038, which is the date for our for shutting down our last power plant, the latest, and I come to this in the end, and we're trying even to do this much earlier. We try, and probably the market will try, and is doing this already. So just a brief overview about, but I will skip this because I've been told we have to hurry, right? Okay. This is basically the energy part of the strategy. So the act on the phase out of the coal-fired power plant. So where we like have a shutdown path, how to shut down the power plants and respectively the pits in the lignite coal field and the hard coal field. We have like an auction system how to shut down the plants. What's also, and now I will touch a lot of issues: economic diversification, development, also like regional aspects, but also the just aspect of like leaving no one behind, and one aspect within the energy law basically is also what we have foreseen for those working in the coal industry, that being already at some age, I think it's, I don't know, I don't know exactly, but they can enjoy an early retirement. This will be also a problem I come to later, maybe, or a challenge. So the second act and strategy we have for the structural change in the coal regions, and what I'm responsible for, is the investment act for the coal regions, trying to make those regions as economically attractive and viable, and also attractive as such, because we need workers, we need a lot of issues in those regions to keep workers, to attract workers, to keep and attract businesses, and it needs a holistic approach. So we have basically, and this is then not really comparable to other countries, I believe, we set up a huge investment package up to 40 billion euro, where we basically give like 40 billion euros to the federal states, the 4 we have, being 3 regions, where they can, like, according to their constitutional mandate, invest in issues like schools, culture, and such. And we have like the Pillar 2, which are the measures in those regions implemented by the federal government. This is mainly the Ministry for Infrastructure, it's mainly us, Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, but it's also infrastructure, it's also research and education. And for those measures directly in those regions, this is the pillar number 2. And obviously, this is like written in the law, and attached to the law are the regional guiding principles in those regions, which obviously direct us when implementing all those investment measures. If you remember that I talked earlier about the Coal Commission, being a commission trying to reach a broad consensus with all the actors in the regions. We have the core of this commission is still active now in the implementation of the Investment Act throughout the years until 2038. It's on the left side. You probably won't recognize anything, but it's a measure how to have everyone on board to discuss new investments, to discuss new challenges, and have like trade unions on board partially, academia, and having an exchange format how to steer the structural change in the regions. So what the actual and topic of this panel is basically the economic diversification and what are the issues, how we try to diversify the economy. As I said, we rather develop the economy in the regions as such, keeping in mind that it needs to be diversified as well. So what we have in this Investment Act is a broad scale of issues we can invest in. And what we see right now already is that we heavily invest in accessibility. This is like train tracks, motorways. Heavily invest in also education, as I said, culture schools, schools, and that we heavily invest in business sites. That's like all those the sites you see along the motorway, which are empty and needs to be developed so factories can be set up. So research and development is also a big issue. But in general, those are the issues we focus on to make the regions more attractive or to keep them attractive. So those are some examples that you have a little bit of a picture of what we actually do in the regions. Those are 3 out of actually 400 single measures we implement since the last 3 years. So this is like a very, very broad approach we have there in the regions. So, and luckily Matthias is also here, and we had the chance to have a first evaluation of our approach and what worked and what didn't work. Where does the money go to? Is there already an impact? So I'm pretty sure Matthias will touch upon this much more in depth. So, but what our lessons learned were from the ministry was, and it's not a surprise, it takes long. So setting up the systems and the structures, the promotion programs already takes some time, and the investments we have in mind are structures, as I said, train tracks, buildings, whatsoever. And obviously they take time in planning. Once we have the structures in place, then they need to be planned, then they need to be built. And if then on those roads more people drive to the regions to work in the factories, that takes some time to evaluate. We see that we have to do much more spending the money in the regions, but we see that the project pipeline is pretty big. So, but content-wise, what actually the most important thing is we grasp is we started with the coal commission and the coal phase out with the fear of, everyone feared somehow that we will lose jobs. We see actually that we created much more jobs than we created more jobs than we lost in the past 3 years. So we have to shift somehow, because we see already here in the second picture that it's also not a surprise that workforce, skilled labor is a challenge. So we have to now steer basically our efforts within the Investment Act, or have to think about how that could work, into directing the money more into attracting skilled and labor as such. So this is like, we do that already with like investment in research and development and accessibility, getting labor into the regions, or like make, even though like enabling people from the regions drive out of the regions because they want to live somewhere else, but want to come back to work like on a daily basis, so commute. So what we have to do is do much more of this, think of more ideas of how to get a labor supply into the regions, and we'll try to do this with the another challenge of actually having agreed already with one of the regions in the West, North Rhine-Westphalia, to speed up the phase-out process of coal until 2030. And us not so much negotiating with the other federal states in the East on agreeing an early phase out, but knowing that, since, as we all know, coal is getting much more costly, or relatively more expensive, because the other energy sources are getting cheaper. We will have probably an early phase out anyhow, so better be prepared. And these are already my last words. So I hope I touched upon some issues we wanted to hear, but I'm pretty sure maybe in the discussion we can talk more about issues you're interested in.
Thank you very much. It's perfect, thanks. Yeah, you already mentioned our next speaker, so it's a perfect transition, actually. Matthias Brachert is now the one responsible for evaluating for the things you've seen. He works as a researcher at the Center of Evidence-Based Policy Advice here in Germany, and he evaluates the effectiveness of regional policies. So it's very interesting to see how you actually measure what you're actually doing. Welcome on stage.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. So there will be some duplications in slides because we performed this evaluation for the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs. As this investment law for coal regions was introduced in 2020, so we now have had 2 years to analyze the effectiveness of all these measures. And our main objective was to provide an evidence-based evaluation, so something like the control group approach, so compare the development also with respect to the development of other regions, and to have a deeper look on the achievements the measurements have affected so far. We have this report here. It's so far in German, but there's also an English translation, so if you want to have a look into it, you can follow the link. We already had some short explanation about the context of this investment law for coal regions. So we had a very comprehensive negotiation process, and we had the political recognition that this coal phase out will affect regions, and so they will experience a negative shock, not only in terms of their energy industries or power generation, but also from a regional perspective, because they are localized in space. So also the economic shock is going to be localized in space, and so we have to compensate regions for experiences with shock. And this investment law for coal region was simply the reaction on this recognition of this economic shock, so of a negative shock, which wanted to be counteracted, let's say, by a positive shock in this provision of, these 40 billion euros for these roughly, say, 20 districts within Germany. Okay, so you can here have this map. So the main pointer is, okay. So these are these 3 regions who are something like in the form of a place-based policies subject to this investment or the subsidies. And what you can also see here, which also has been mentioned by Tobias, these regions are usually characterized, at least from a German perspective, by structural weaknesses. So demographic aging, a lack of growth, and high unemployment rates from a comparative perspective. So they are already in this central or general German system of regional aid. And on top, of this aid system, they receive this funding by the investment law for core regions. Tobias already showed us there are two pillars in this investment law. So one pillar is for the, let's say, the regional level, one pillar is for the federal level. So there are 14 billion euros for the regional level and 26 billion euros for the federal level, where you have some complex regional or, let's say, legal framework on how to spend this money. And it's also associated with Just Transition Fund. So this Just Transition Fund from EU is part of this allocation scheme. And now when we come to diversification, this law has something like a comprehensive approach to diversification. So we focus on different aspects. So first aspect would be strengthening of the regional knowledge base. So if you think about diversification, in this sense would be strengthening of existing regional R&D capabilities, also providing complementary R&D of infrastructure, but also creating something like new focus on the regions. It's always quite difficult talking about diversification efforts in those regions because you have to diversify away from coal, which creates some tensions because you have this coal industry which is dominating the region, and you need to find some new sources or new sources of growth or new industries where to diversify in. And this is done in this law in terms of strengthening the local research base. Then strengthening accessibility, so providing infrastructure to get to these regions by providing education, so providing education to people to shift away from these mining industries, and also in different aspects providing assistance to firms via this JTF, and providing new jobs via direct placement of public authorities. So you have a quite comprehensive approach. You address the knowledge base of the region, you're addressing firm level investments, and you also place, or you have some direct employment effects via placing public authorities within those regions. And then you have this time frame problem, because it's, at least from our perspective, it's always connecting some expectation management. So if you're talking about infrastructure investment, you're talking about medium to long-term effects of these measures. If you're talking about setting up a new R&D infrastructure, this is likely to have some effects at least in 5 years. But however, this does not align with this policy cycle. So policy cycles usually demand for short-term results, which is at conflict to some of these measures, and we also argue in this report that you have to do some expectation management to get people on board, but also see that, or make clear that structural change is taking some time. What we see so far is the spatial incidence of this program. It works quite well, so the money is spent in those regions which are we aim to target it. However, we have some outflows, but this is intended as the effects of these measures should take place in the coal mining regions. And when we developed something like a baseline projection model, what we would expect to happen in those regions during the next years, and what are the main problems. And the main problems are similar to what we've learned in the earlier sessions, also today. The main problem of those coal mining regions is labor. So labor shortage, declining labor force, aging. This is, I think, also similar across many other coal mining regions. What we see so far is that if we compare the growth potential of those regions, we see that all those lignite regions, they are here. They have a negative growth potential in terms of labor, and some positive effects in terms of capital and total factor productivity, which is different from the non-coal regions. They have a positive contributions across all these 3 dimensions. And this comes along with the problems. So we need qualified labor. We need to attract labor, because even you see here, this is from, for instance, the Lusatia region, the growth percentage during the next 20 years is limited by almost 1% due to labor shortages. This means that we need a massive inflow of labor into these regions. So far, what we see in the first 2 years is pretty similar. So we see positive effect or positive development of these regions in the first 3 years of funding. However, if you compare with relative performance, you see that those regions who already had these problems in terms of labor or future labor shortage, they also performed worse during the first 3 years. And when we conducted something like a control group approach to measure the effectiveness, there are many more in the report, but I just wanted to show here that if we compare these development of those regions so far with a potential control group of regions from Germany with similar structural weaknesses, we see that at least the spending, which was issued so far, did help those regions to align and not to fall back. So there's no further backsliding to the general development in Germany. However, we would expect in the long term to see is also some positive effects of the funding. So that's it from my side. So far we've seen out of these 41 billion euros that roughly in the first 3 years, 650 million euros are spent. So it takes some time also for the funding to get to the region. You have to establish all the structures. You have to establish all these measurements to create absorptive capacity for the funds in the regions. We see that we have a large variety of measures, which makes it also difficult to evaluate this program. We focus so far on accessibility, and diversification is addressed through this, let's say, free-for-all strategy, creating infrastructure, creating R&D projects into educational institutions, and also with JTF funding and this placement of public government agencies. We see so far variation is different across regions, and it needs some time for these measures to be effective. That's from my side.
May I introduce Mr. Nkosinathi Nkonyane? He is the development economist and has served as a member of various intergovernmental structures for policy making in South Africa. He currently serves as acting CEO for the Mpumalanga Green Cluster, and he's going to explain more about green diversification in South Africa. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for the kind introductions. How do I move this technology? Okay, there we go. Thank you so much for the kind introductions. And thank you for inviting us to this platform. We are happy to share the work that we are currently doing in the Republic of South Africa, particularly in Mpumalanga province. My colleagues did explain, of course, yesterday how the cluster agency came about, and the colleagues from the national department as well as the colleagues from the provincial government of Mpumalanga highlighted, or rather explained, how we were formed. But I'm very excited to tell you that GIZ really assisted us a lot in establishing this cluster agency, of course with government, and this is a very important platform for collaboration. So what we have been doing is essentially to look at issues of bringing investment in the province of Mpumalanga. And we have attracted investment to the tune of about $6 billion US dollars. I've signed those agreements within a short space of time from 2021 when the agency was registered up until now. And we are talking to many companies. When I talk about signing investor declarations, it's essentially talking to companies that are showing, or other developers that are showing interest in working with us, and then they would tell us about the opportunities that they see in our space. Then we sign with them those agreements that they are interested in implementing those projects. So there is 6 billion of those projects in terms of value that we have already signed as the Green Cluster Agency. Now this is the map of South Africa. Reverse. Okay, this is, how do I, just a moment, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, this is South Africa, this is the map of South Africa, and this is where Mpumalanga is located, and these are just interesting figures, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this, but I do have to mention that South Africa has a lot of coal, and this subject is quite a contentious one at the moment, and my colleagues did highlight that yesterday. It is said that we still have another 200 years of coal available if we mine at the scale that we are currently mining at this moment. I don't want to fixate myself on those figures, but what I want to explain is that we still have a lot of coal underground. And to tell people that you are moving away from these activities, I mean, especially from the perspective of the province where I come from, it creates a lot of uncertainties, but I will explain what we have done, and my colleague yesterday explained the work that we are doing just to allay those fears and to tell people that there are opportunities in the industries of the future. So let me not talk about this, but what is important to note here is that we have vast lands. South Africa is a huge country. We have a province that is even bigger than Germany. And bigger than many countries in Europe, which is the Northern Cape. So we have vast lands in South Africa. Now, what's important to note about this is that we have the space to do anything we want to do. We have the resources, we have the people. My colleagues explained yesterday that we have a youth of about 68% that is out of employment in the country. That is a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. You can't have those levels of unemployment amongst the youth. They become innovative, and being innovative means crime. So it is important that we get them to employment, of course. So those are the realities that we are facing. But of course, we are dealing with those kind of situations, working with government in this regard. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this slide, but as a trained economist, I like talking to graphs, and this graph just depicts the mining, or just shows you the mining sector, how huge the mining sector is in South Africa. This is the contribution of mining to the province of Mpumalanga in terms of the economy, the GDP. So as you can see, it's quite a huge sector, and that is very important to note in what we are going to be talking about. Now, with regards to this map, I'm just depicting the mines in Mpumalanga. You can already see it's a town of mines. All these mines are in Mpumalanga. So we have about 130 mines that are in this region. But out of these 130 mines, we have 5 big mines, maybe right. Oh, I think I've skipped that slide that is showing. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here. It's going backwards. Yeah, I wanted to show one of the slides that is actually showing those mines. So there are actually 5 big mines or big mine operators in the province. I don't know, I'm sure I missed that slide, but I thought I had it. So what is important to note with this slide is that the electricity generation activities are responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions. And what is important to note is that all the products, most of the products that we produced in South Africa are produced under a high carbon environment. And that is going to be a problem moving to the future. We have a matured motor sector industry in South Africa. Some of the companies from here, VW, BMW, Audi, they are manufacturing cars in South Africa. And we know that we will have difficulties in terms of the export markets in a few years to come. And therefore, it becomes important that we start to deal with this kind of scenario. And I think yesterday some of my colleagues even made mention of the facility, the 8.5 billion facility from COP. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and with the political, tour or rather exchange. And the question that was asked is why is South Africa delaying in terms of utilizing that facility? And the issue is, I think that question was answered yesterday. It takes a lot of time to plan for these things. And there's a lot of work that is happening. My colleague yesterday touched on some of the initiatives, especially around hydrogen. There are a lot of hydrogen activities that are currently taking place. And of course, there was a lot of planning that went through that work. So we begin to see certain provinces in South Africa, like for instance, provinces like the Northern Cape and the Western Cape, partnering with other countries like Namibia. There are a lot of hydrogen activities that are happening on that other side. But also in Mpumalanga itself, yesterday I woke up to news that one of the biggest companies that are operating in Mpumalanga, which is Sasol, will be manufacturing hydrogen in its current facilities. And there's a 300 million support that comes from Germany. So there are, of course, a lot of activities that are taking shape as we speak. And all these things, have value chain opportunities. And we're looking forward to that, because if we talk in terms of economic diversification, what it means that we need to analyze the sector itself, which is work that we were doing over time. We now know that in South Africa we have an opportunity, or rather we have a propensity to produce 600 million tons of hydrogen by 2050. Out of those, after that analysis that we have done, and we already know that this sector has a potential to create 1.4 million jobs by 2050. We also know that by 2050 we will need about 2 million electrolyzers, and we also know that we will need about 60 gigawatts of energy. And if you talk green hydrogen, obviously, you are talking green energy. So these are opportunities that are in our space, and of course, in terms of diversification, this creates a lot of new opportunities. This is not the only sector that we have analyzed. We have analyzed all the sectors, and we already know what will happen. So in terms of that facility, in terms of those declarations, we have decided as a country that that will focus on hydrogen, on the hydrogen economy. It will also focus on the matters of over and above hydrogen. We are also looking at electric vehicles, as well as the issue of green energy. So these are the things that we've been doing, and of course analyzing all the value chain opportunities, and we already know what sort of opportunities are available. Sometimes we are quick to say we need to train people, but without doing a proper analysis and understanding of what is going to transpire, where is your economy going, you may find yourself training on the wrong skills that are not going to be required by the industries of the future. So that's the exercise we've been undertaking in South Africa at the moment. Let me not waste a lot of time about the coal value chain in South Africa, but this is the scenario. We produce a lot of coal for domestic use. We produce a lot of coal for the export market. And there are a lot of activities that are linked, industries that are linked to coal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but also we are supplying some of our neighboring countries with energy, with all the problems that we have. But nevertheless, that's a subject for another day. This is also demonstrating how big the coal sector is. It shows here, if you could look at this graph, you can see that we are producing about 250 metric tons per annum. So that's quite huge, and the sector is quite big in South Africa. These are the biggest coal operators in our space. And this morning I woke up to news that 2 of these companies are laying off workers, and that is very disturbing. But of course, it means to us we really need to work faster. There should be agility. We need to double our efforts to resolve these kind of challenges. In terms with regards to economic diversification, there's a lot of work that is already happening in our space. I'm sure you are all aware of the fact that South Africa shut down the first coal power station last year, August, which is Komati Power Station. We have a schedule to shut down other power stations. Of course, there's one that will be shut down around 2025, 2026, and in the next 10 years, we'll shut 8 more. That is the plan, that is the schedule, but of course, there are a lot of debates in South Africa whether it is ideal to shut down these coals as per this schedule, but the government is committed to the process. The only issue right now is the disruptions that we know in terms of our power disruptions, which we normally refer to as load shedding. So that's the current situation that we have, but it really shows that we are committed to the process of moving away from coal at some point. One interesting aspect is that these days I see a lot of mines in South Africa that are moving towards a very nice concept that is called, sustainable mining. What it means, you see a lot of coal mines now that are using renewable energy in their mining operations. And there are a lot of arguments to say, why should you mine coal with clean energy if you are still going to burn the coal? It looks like a contradiction, but at this point, we are happy that the mines are beginning to, embrace the concept of sustainability. It is quite important for us. Here we are looking at some, industrial development opportunities. This one is led by the power utility, Eskom in South Africa, and we are already looking at reclaiming a lot of steel and a lot of copper from the power stations that we will demolish. So we want to create an industry there for manufacturing all that we'll reclaim from this process. I would explain this, but it will take a lot of time. But the essence of it is that we are looking at industrialization opportunities, and we believe this will create a lot of employment. By the way, we have about 14 coal power stations in South Africa, and if I say we will, in the next few years, decommission a number of those coal stations, then it means there would be a lot of opportunities that are linked to that. So that is what is happening currently pertaining at the moment in our space. The power utility is also working with us in a number of other projects. So as the Green Cluster Agency, we are at the core of the implementation of some of these initiatives because we were set up as a vehicle for, collaboration. So meaning we facilitate a lot of the activities that are taking place. One of those interesting activities is an industrial. In South Africa at the moment, there is a process that was undertaken by government around 2015-16 of, what is this process of designating specific areas based on evidence-based, studies that were done. And those areas are called renewable energy zones. So what it means in an energy renewable zone, it means the time that it will take for you to develop a project is shortened significantly, which means if it takes you 24 months to get an EIA, then in this area it will take you about 4 to 6 months to get an EIA. There's a lot of frustration. We're talking to a lot of developers, The frustration are all these requirements, especially requirements that relates to rights that you must obtain when you want to develop projects in South Africa. We've been talking with a lot of companies with regard to this aspect. Some of this would be, you find that a company wants to invest maybe in a utility scale project, but obviously there are a whole of legislations that you must go through. You must apply for that and that and that. The cluster agency has been at the center of that connecting nexus between government and the private sector. So we have done well in that regard, but there are still a lot of issues which we are still trying to resolve in that regard. Other industries, of course, 5 areas of work which we deem important for economic diversification. One being your agriculture industry, energy, I spoke about that, the energy activities that are currently taking place, and then we're also looking at agriculture, but agriculture in terms of climate smart agriculture. A lot of activities that we're looking at with regards to that, and we're working with a lot of companies. One interesting project, we are working with one of the mining, the mines on a lot of land in our space. So we are working with one mine. This mine has a lot of land, and we decided to speak to them on how we can use this land because it's not being used. I'm wrapping up. So the mine rehabilitated land through these negotiations that we had. They rehabilitated a strip of land, and then there's also virgin land. So what we did was to clean the mine water, remove all the heavy toxins, and we use the water for irrigation on the virgin land. The yields that came out of that are excellent. And also on the virgin land, what we discovered is that it's not good for crops. Or rather the land that is rehabilitated. The virgin land is good for crops. You can get a very good yield, but of course there are certain crops that would grow there. But on the virgin land, on the rehabilitated land, that is good for grass, for feeding cattle. So that is what we are looking at upscaling on these initiatives. The other one, of course, would be the issue of reskilling. I was talking about all the workers that are losing work. So we have started a lot of initiatives around this reskilling of workers, the circular economy activities. There's quite a lot of activities that are taking place. In a nutshell, let me not waste a lot of time. Maybe in closing, we seem to receive a lot of support from different stakeholders across the board. The only issue right now is that most of the funding that we receive focuses on, what is this, studies, which is the technical aspect. But we have moved to a level where now we need to begin to implement certain projects. So it would be good just to, for some of these things, we have done a lot of pilots, and some of these things are proving to be things that can generate, economic activity. So we really need to start to implement or to execute these projects. So that is our South African story. And on that note, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you so much. You've already mentioned a lot of examples, and I hope you all took notes. Maybe something is possible in your areas. We have one more presentation to go. Wiktoria Beckmann is a consultant at Guidehouse, and she's going to talk about economic diversion from her perspective. And I'm very, very quick, so we get some time in.
Now it's working. I'm the lucky one. Thank you for the introduction. I work for Guidehouse, and Guidehouse is leading a consortium of partners on delivering technical assistance on the ground to coal and carbon-intensive regions in Europe. We do this on behalf of the European Commission of DG Regio. And today I would like to share with you some insights from those technical assistances that focus on economic diversification. And I have only 4 slides, if I remember correctly, so please bear with me. A few words about the program before we dive into the economic diversification aspects. The technical assistance program is called Just Transition Platform Groundwork, short JTP Groundwork, and is delivered under the Just Transition platform. It's a comprehensive support scheme for coal and carbon-intensive regions in Europe, where they can receive capacity building support, connect on conferences, and since this year also receive technical assistance tailored to their needs. We had the first wave. We are 6 months into the implementation of the technical assistance, and you can see the 6 beneficiaries that received support in this round. And maybe just to mention, the applying regions could choose, and also municipalities, could choose from a tasty menu of different support offerings, for example, strategy development, project planning and design, also stakeholder engagement, but basically there was no limit to what they could ask us to support with. And we then selected experts to help them work on the ground, build capacity in workshops, and deliver on the selected objective. And since we speak about economic diversification, I need to mention that this was the favorite topic among our applicants. And I think this is well reflected in the fact that 4 out of the 6 technical assistances in the first round touch upon, or maybe are centered around the topic of economic diversification. And I noticed from the participation at the conferences that we often speak about economic diversification at the high level, about strategies and how to approach it from the strategic perspective, maybe from the national level even. And what I would like to share with you today are the very practical and distinct challenges that regions, I will only speak about the regional level, face when they start to implement their economic diversification strategies. And the main takeaway from today is probably that I want to show you that those challenges are very different and they become very specific, and it takes months to resolve each of them. And I will start with Łódzkie, the region in central Poland. Maybe you know the Bełchatów region, home to the most polluting lignite power plant in Europe. And Łódzkie's economy is, of course, very heavily dependent on the power plant and mine complex. And at the same time, the level of entrepreneurship, so amount of companies per capita, is far below the regional average in the transition era and also far below the national average. So the region asked us, how can I actually effectively support small and medium enterprises, who are the backbone of the European economy, so that they also carry our economy going forward. And the approach implemented was to go out and to ask the entrepreneurs themselves, what do they need? Sounds very simple, but it has never been done before in the history of the regional government. As soon as they moved on to implementation of interventions, the stakeholder engagement stopped. So that's what we've done first, and then also we asked business institutions what they could actually offer as a response to those needs. Then we also combined this with an assessment of what is currently missing in the region. We have mapped over 120 measures supporting SMEs in the region. No one had expected that. No one knew about all those schemes. And then we also draw on some international best practices to design an SME support scheme. And I will show you on the next slide what precisely we have learned from that process. Continuing with Västerbotten in Sweden, investments, there are large-scale investments already underway in Västerbotten. For example, they want to support battery and green steel production, also under the Just Transition Fund. But at the same time, it's one of the most sparsely populated regions in Europe. It's on the very north of Sweden. So the main question is, where can I find workers for my new industries, and how do I attract them to come to my region? The approach implemented was to first assess the needed skills for those industries, then look at which European regions could supply labor, and this is a politically sensitive topic because, of course, you cannot take workers away from the regions where they are most needed anyways. And then develop an approach whom you could contact in those regions and how you could convince employees to come and work in your region. Then Médio Tejo in Portugal actually went back to the drawing board and asked themselves, what industries do we actually want to support? There are many sustainable industries that we could choose from, but which ones are relevant for our region, and how do we build them? And the approach selected there or pursued there was to, on the one hand, examine success stories from regions also far away in Europe, from Mediterranean, and then conduct an asset mapping and understand what assets, physical but also educational hubs, entrepreneurs, ecosystem does the region have, and which of those sustainable industry visions could actually fit into what is already present. And the most important tool used was to actually bring stakeholders together, not only the public sector representatives, but also the entrepreneurs and also the local public interested in the topic to draw those visions and align on the approach. And then my last example comes from Giuveli in Romania, where the main question was to, and I'm laughing, I will maybe tell you in the discussion why later on, but the question is, how can you actually make the public sector be interested in investing in the transition area? There are lots of investment opportunities resulting from the Just Transition process, and also lots of investment opportunities under the Just Transition Fund. But in Giuveli, the difficulty was that not many people were aware of that. And the approach pursued in this technical assistance was to conduct local focus groups. There were over 23 focus groups conducted in this short period of time, with over 70 participants, and I think workshops with over 120 participants, which really served the aim to inform people about the Just Transition, about accessing finance, about developing projects, and also support them with designing specific projects. So those are the 4 examples. They are totally different challenges. I hope you agree with me. And then shortly, I would like to zoom in on the example from Poland. This is also the technical assistance that I had the pleasure to lead, or still have the pleasure to lead. And as I said, we have organized workshops with entrepreneurs and also with private persons wanting to start a business, and ask them, what do you need in order to become successful? We learned from the past schemes, over 120 that have been partially evaluated. And also we invited the business environment institutions and asked them what usually works and what does not. And as a result, we have developed a support scheme for small and medium enterprises that is divided into 2 tracks. I will shortly describe that and ask me more in the break if you're interested. So young enterprises and also private persons are going to be supported under the so-called incubation track, where they receive grants that are significant, combined with consulting services, but those 2 go hand in hand. So as you move on through the program, you can add more finances to more funding to your project, but you also need to achieve some agreed milestones with your incubation manager. And the scheme also provides a network of like-minded entrepreneurs and a wide range of consulting services. And then we should not forget about the mature SMEs who are providing employment in the region, but they are often locked in the status quo and are not growing beyond what they have been doing in the past decades. And we want to support those SMEs as well through inviting them to the growth track, where they can use consulting services, but also peer-to-peer learning from mentors from other enterprises, and learn how they can raise their ambition and how they can look beyond the status quo. So that's what we have designed. And a few learnings from the approach that I have partially already shared was that reaching out to stakeholders was surprisingly a great novelty, and the regional government has been so inspired by this innovative method that they went with this to the Ministry of Regional Policy in Poland, and they said, we have never seen something like this, we need to implement it in other interventions as well, and it has been a great success. This helped us to disprove top-down assumptions. For example, we have been convinced that it's actually hard for SMEs to apply for funding, and then we had their 30 SMEs sitting and telling us, no, when I know which program to apply to, no problem, I can do that. But no one has the overview of the support schemes available in the region. And I would like to close this example with 2 questions that have been on top of our minds when working on this. The first question is, how can you, when designing any intervention supporting entrepreneurship, and I think this has been touched upon regarding the evaluation, how can you actually ensure that you create added value and not just give away funds, because the most popular entrepreneurship support programs would be to give away funds without any criteria and offer good food, for example. But this, of course, does not necessarily create any added value. And second question is, how can you help businesses to develop beyond the status quo and not just help them continue doing what they are doing? This is my last slide. I want to highlight a few takeaways from the 4 technical assistances. Building on the example from Mediotejo, I wanted to highlight that regions still struggle to align on a vision for the region. Not only economic diversification vision, but a vision for the next decades to come, touching upon infrastructure, inflow of people to the region, and also quality of life. This vision needs to be linked to the assets that are currently present in the region so that meaningful investments can be channeled. Maybe we'll touch upon this in the discussion, what I mean with that. It is key to involve the business environment and public alongside the public sector stakeholders in the process, and not only in the strategy design process, but also in the technical implementation and design of the criteria. Where you actually need to assess what is specifically needed. And then a surprising learning for us was that we overestimate the knowledge that we, the managing authority, the local community, have about the opportunities in the region, be it assets, be it presence of some entrepreneur networking groups, be it also support schemes. And it's key to actually revisit those different mappings regularly and republish them so that people are aware about the opportunities. And a learning from Juvali in Romania was that one key, or maybe one promising approach to engaging local communities and making them attracted to making investments and financing opportunities is to communicate success stories in a very clear, concise way, specifically when we speak about topics as technical as accessing finance. And my last sentence here would be that I would like to close with is that when we speak about economic diversification, we have job creation in the back of our minds. But we need to acknowledge that job creation does not happen with this one policy intervention, with this one measure. And it is difficult because also under the Just Transition Fund, this will be one of the key indicators. How many jobs have you created with this or that intervention? But this is just something that I would like to now close with, that job creation needs to be the focus of long-term policies that are consistent and complementary and not be one of the KPIs in the intervention one is planning. This is all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wiktoria. You can already take a seat here on stage because we are having a time for a short panel discussion. I would also like to ask all the other panelists to join me on the stage for a few questions. Thank you very much. Well, Wiktoria, you have already asked the question on one of your last slides, and I would also like to hear the perspective of all of you. How can you create added value and not just give away funds? You've already touched upon this, so I might also give the opportunity for all of you to maybe share your perspective on this. How do you diversify an economy and not just send money and nothing happens? Whoever wants to start? No one wants to start? Wiktoria, maybe otherwise you can maybe focus a bit more on this.
How would you do it?
It is difficult, and when designing the support scheme, just to take an explicit example, we also need to agree on a set of KPIs that the scheme operators will be evaluated upon, that the program will be evaluated upon, that the participants of the scheme will be evaluated upon. And it is natural to think directly about KPIs like how many jobs have been created or how many enterprises have been set up. And what really helped us to reassess how can we make sure that we actually measure a value that the program adds is to focus on the bottlenecks that we wanted to resolve with the support scheme. And for example, since we have heard from entrepreneurs that they, from one specific group, that they lack the market understanding in the constantly changing economic and legislative times in Poland, one of the KPIs we then agreed to suggest was to actually ask the entrepreneurs themselves how their understanding of the economic landscape and also how their market understanding has changed over the course of the program. So really try to assess the growth of the mindset also and the added skills, and not only the pure economic indicators. And so this is somehow touching on the evaluation angle.
Maybe Matthias, if you want to elaborate on the evaluation angle of that, yeah?
Yeah, it's always quite difficult to evaluate a program very effectively, or at least from a scientific perspective. There's some selection into these programs and always identification issues, which are usually not addressed. But from our perspective, we see that it depends, as you already mentioned. So it also depends on the targets you're after, because if it's all about employment creation, if it's about productivity, it's about wages, about quality of employment. There are so many different targets to focus on, and this is also very specific to a region. So if you talk about, for instance, Germany, so job creation itself would not be the most urgent problem, but rather productivity and wages and having good jobs. And this is also specific to the region. It needs to be addressed, and this might differ across context. What we know is, at least from our work, is that investment subsidies seem to work quite well. So here you can combine at least both, so creating something like the need to safeguard or create employment and focus also a bit on productivity. There are many options, but from a sense that you need to focus on the process for sure, but you also need to have proper evaluations to create more knowledge on what works. This is, at least from an economic perspective, the most important thing. We still lack knowledge about what works.
That's very interesting. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to add to that one point, the top-down, bottom-up point you touched upon. So one way how to ensure that we don't lose the funds and don't add value is basically knowing what's working on the ground, what's actually the potential already in place. So, and this is not what we as a ministry actually can assess so easily. So that's why we provide the frame, and then in very elaborated workshop process on the ground, it is then elaborated what will work the best. And so developing a strategy for a program using funds it's also not rocket science from bottom-up approach, ensures you already that we are on the right track for not losing the funds.
Nati, you want to elaborate also?
Yeah, maybe in our case, what I've seen is that earlier on I spoke about the role of analyzing these sectors and bringing these enterprises into the discussion so that they understand what are the needs of the future, and that always build a strong case for you to say. Sometimes it's easy to direct them and say this is where you could focus your businesses, because what we see at the moment is a stampede of people presenting proposals to us. We've developed a simple online database where all the small businesses can register. And within that database, we are able to see what sort of businesses are in the region and who wants to do what or who is already doing what. And we link them at times with the private sector. Like the big companies sometimes would tell us about opportunities that would be available in the future. So we try to direct them in that, direct them to future opportunities that may arise. Otherwise, it's highly likely we've seen a lot of them fail. And it becomes imperative that you sort of, give that guidance, and as maybe the government institutions becomes also critical in terms of this analysis that I'm talking about. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. You want to elaborate on this? No? Okay. Because something you've all touched upon is this, and we also spoke about yesterday, is this, instead of just looking at these processes and a just energy transition from a top to bottom perspective, is from bottom to top. So another perspective that I would be interested in from you is what support should local central governments give to the diversification strategies of local authorities? It's probably also something you can share a bit more in South Africa.
Yes, there is a role of local government, and currently there is a lot of work that is being done, supported by the different funders, to also capacitate local government, because sometimes you also have capacity issues within local government to, provides further support to this work. So it becomes important that local government should also be capacitated. But obviously all the programs, the projects that we're talking about takes place in a local space. Local government becomes very, very important. Local government becomes a critical player. We are normally accused in South Africa for consulting to consult. A lot of consultations. So yeah, in a way, that consultation is important, and private sector, local government is always very, very important in this regard, because all these things will take place in localities. It will take place in the local space. So yeah.
Yeah, that's also what you said, right? So it's basically, elaborated from a German perspective, maybe.
Exactly. So the local government knows most of the time best what's in their sphere of mandate, works well. So this first, like involving in strategy development, but also in the ongoing operations. But what we have like in Investment Act is also like, when you remember pillar first, is like, that's where the money goes to the local government to invest in whatever is needed, and then it comes into play. Do they have the capacity to implement those activities? Where we have an own program equipping them with the capacities to implement those funds. So local government is important, and that's why we address that in at least those three issues.
Maybe I can add to that, because from my experience from working with European carbon-intensive regions, there are many regional governments where there are only 2 people working on just transition. And there are, for example, governing funds of hundreds of millions of euros and need to spend the money now within the next 3 years. So I think what you suggested, or what you touched upon, that the central government can support also throughout the operation, and support in also maybe giving advice, but support capacity building, support in project pipeline planning if the central government has capacities to do that. That is great, because I have been really shocked how understaffed the regional governments and their Just Transition Fund departments are. Yes, and I think if I may still add to another point, I think the central level can support with not only providing information, but also structuring it. I have just recently learned that in Poland, at the central level, there is an initiative now to structure all the SME support schemes. And I have just told you that in the region of Łódź, we have identified 120, and there was not a single overview of them. So I think that's also a way how central governments could help.
I think this is the issue of every type of tier in the government. So there are different levels, and every level needs to be adequately staffed. So I think we cannot only talk about the local level. You need to have some coordination to avoid duplication of structures, and that everybody's doing the same. So you need to develop some region-specific strategies for sure, which should be based on local knowledge. However, there should be some coordination to provide also knowledge on what is happening on within or in other regions and other municipalities, just to get some effectiveness in this process, which needs to be streamlined.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we have 7 EKJET partner countries here and more in the room as guests. And now if you're looking at an economic diversification, maybe you can all give me your perspective. Are there common methods and approaches in developing a shared vision for a specific region? And how can this vision then direct activities of different actors and stakeholders? Maybe you can also share a bit more of your insights there. Wiktoria, yes.
Yes, I can go first, and please cut me short because I could speak for hours on this. When you look at the territorial just transition plans of European regions, you will see that there's always a vision, and those visions have been built up on past strategic documents, but also through public consultation with the local communities. And they are also based on the vision enshrined in the European Green Deal often. But what we can see is that there is a certain mainstream that regions follow, and that is the commonality that I see, that in some discussions with European regions, for example, during the Exchange EU project, we ended up where we had 3 regions, everyone claiming to be the new hydrogen valley. But then we were like, is it even possible that every region becomes a hydrogen valley? What about other valleys, agricultural valley, scientific valley, any other valley? And that was a very inspiring discussion that I will never forget. So there are certainly commonalities. But now when we think about Mediotejo, what I have just presented, that some regions do come back to the drawing board. And now when they need to spend the money, they realize, what exactly now do I spend it on? And they need to specify that vision. And for this, one of our key learnings was that it is really important to invite as many people, as many groups to the table as you can. So invite women, invite the elderly, invite the youth. You can paint wonderful visions with kids, invite underrepresented groups, because those people are all going to carry the vision and they need to own it because they're going to work in those new industries, they're going to use the new infrastructure. And yeah, maybe I will stop here.
Yeah, maybe Nat, you can also add to that.
Yeah, maybe just to bring in a South African example, I'll just answer this by means of giving an example. We go to Poland as part of the study tour, and we go to a power station. I see a power station. There are some activities. There's gypsum being manufactured within that power station. You go back to South Africa, there are a lot of, there are heaps and heaps of coal ash or fly ash. And, you know, there are different products that can come out of that, gypsum being one of them, zeolites, you know, applications for cement, a lot of things. And we have done studies, we have done all these things. But when it comes to that part of the world, the laws will be different. You cannot do those things within a power station. The license that is provided to the power station would not allow a power station to do it inside the power station. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that you would have different laws. So there will be no one template that fits all. You develop according to your own circumstances, according to the laws of the land, and those kind of things. But of course, there is a lot that you can draw from others. We have those type of activities. And you know, on that same example again, if you want to pick up this coal ash maybe to another site, let's say it's considered as you know, what's the right word to use here? Meaning there are laws that regulate moving, you know, certain waste to other sites. So it's not going to be one size fits all. There would be different ways, different approaches. But what guides you are the laws of the land, is the situation, the dynamics in the space. So that's how I see it from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a bit different. Maybe it's because Europe is quite similar in culture, even though we have many different countries. But overall, the structure is quite similar compared to South Africa. Yeah. I have a lot of questions still written here, but we are running out of time, and I want to give you also the option to ask questions regarding to economic diversification. So just let me quickly know, are there any questions in the audience to our panel regarding economic diversification? Ah, perfect, in the back. I'll just quickly come to you. You can use number 1. I will take number 4. Perfect. Hi.
Thank you, Lydia Wojtel, Agora Energiewende. My question is about the Łódzkie województwo, and the question is, you were talking about the goal of SMEs being more resilient, and that caught my attention because I'm wondering what the resilience is about. Is it economic, is it ecologic, or is it any other resilience, particular resilience that you had in mind? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I mentioned resilience though. Maybe it was on the slide. Yes. So on the one hand, we want to have new SMEs being set up with new innovative ideas, and also because there are just more SMEs needed on the market. But when we speak about the mature SMEs, they have been doing their business in a similar way for the past decades. That's what we've learned in our workshops with them. And whenever asked what they would need most would be to, I don't know, pay lower social contribution costs, find skilled workforce for the production that they have been currently doing. And there was not so much of not many new fresh ideas, and not many entrepreneurs sharing with us, we want to actually diversify. There was, I think, one enterprise among those 60 who said, oh, I already have diversified. I have a second leg and a third leg, and now I'm thinking about the fourth leg to adapt to the market. But truly, I don't know what the fourth leg should be, and I don't know where to find information about this. So this is what we've learned from the mature enterprises, that in order to make them resilient for the transition, they also need additional support in developing new products, and simply thinking that the landscape in which they are flourishing right now is not going to be the same in 20 years or 30 years from now.
That answer your question? Perfect. Any more questions from the... perfect, yeah.
Thank you. My question is directed to Wiktoria as well. I'm Zimasa from the Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa. So you spoke a lot about the bottom-up approach within communities and building that inclusive vision at that local space. And obviously for a country like South Africa, that is fundamental. What we're currently working on is tapping into that local agency at the ground. I'd be interested to find out from you how you went about getting that common vision. You spoke about bringing everybody together, but often different people or different organizations pull in different directions. So what would be interesting for us is perhaps if you can share some insights on how to build a common vision, which would then move towards the creation of a project pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe I can touch upon an example from my work in Silesia, in the city of Rybnik, where the organization I worked for at that time was contracted with developing this vision. So the city wanted to know, we actually want to know what people want in 2030 to 50, and we want to have a very comprehensive vision, not only in terms of jobs, but also how the city should be restructured, if there should be new sports activities, etc. And this project took 2 years to actually go on the ground. And so not only there were researchers from the team who went under the ground to speak to the miners about how their future quality of life should look like. They went to kindergartens, they asked the elderly. So that was really not really inviting people to a facility or to the government's, to the municipality office, but really going out. And it took a lot of time. And at the time, and then when we collected all this data, we tried to map it on a large sheet of digital paper, and we created a spaghetti of interlinked aspects. That, for example, someone said, I see this bottleneck, I want this to be resolved, but then we saw that this bottleneck, that, for example, entrepreneurs do not have one focal point in the local government, was actually connected to so many other aspects. And then someone mentioned that they want to have new bicycle lines, but then there were elderly people saying that for those bicycle lines, trees need to be cut, and then there is no shade on the streets, and they need to walk in the sun. That's not what they want for their future. So it was very difficult work to make sense of all those perspectives and combine them in a way that you can identify the common challenges that need to be leveraged. And as I said, this took 2 years and a lot of illustrative work also to later explain the results to the people involved. And it wasn't easy, but I think this is the one example I can share now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. We have time for one more quick question, and then
May I just add like one thing,
yeah,
like
sure,
as a good example?
I'll just walk over here.
What I learned from the Lusatia or Lausitz region is to create a common vision of a project, of the entire structural change exercise, is that they have a workshop, a very lengthy workshop process where apparently they don't exchange emails when pitching a project proposal and discussing the details. They always sit together and talk. I don't know, you have to have the capacity to do this. It's obvious, but they always sit together and talk until they find a result. So if the result is the project doesn't make sense, then this is the result, but they talked it through. So no one is basically just like cut out and say no, it doesn't work. So they talk it through. But with the capacity we have in the regions and the personal staff, it's probably not always manageable.
Okay, thank you very much for elaborating a bit further. One more question from G.
I would like to understand more about the budget allocation. On highest level, you have 8 categories, so including accessibility, education, culture, and so on. Here, most of the Bundesland, the budget for research R&D is almost the highest. However, for the business location, sometimes very low. So I would like to understand more because I understand also SME needs fund, research, R&D are very important, especially for new technology and so on. However, job creation is maybe not directly from R&D for the local, community. So maybe reason behind, and I would like to know more. Thank you.
Thanks. It's probably a question to Matthias. Yeah?
I think the slide that you're referring to was the federal measures. There is the second pillar, which are the local measures, and they are focusing more on this local business infrastructure, and so because they have more knowledge, so it makes sense for them to focus on these issues, and they create these business parks, and so they are higher shares in this pillar. So this was more at the federal level. That's why there are more, let's say, cross-regional activities in there, which usually does not relate directly to the business-oriented infrastructure in those regions. So the second pillar, which was not on the slide, should reflect higher figures on this issue.
Thanks for answering. With that, we come to the end of this session about economic diversification and also almost to the end of the conference. A big applause to all our panelists here. Thank you very much, all of you.